Hi, everybody. Welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here tonight. I just have a little something to say. I am really sick with a virus. I didn't want to cancel the show because I just love Mark Fultz. He's an absolute wonderful guest, and it's always an honor to have him on the show. And I'm going to do my best not to cough. And if I do, and I irritate you guys, I'm sorry. And I'll try, after the show is all broadcast, I'm going to go back in and edit the coughing out as much as I can. So everybody, thank you so much for being here. And tonight, my guest is Mark Fultz. He is an author. He's a native of Chattanooga. He is a psychic, an artist, a trance medium, a songwriter, and now he's a storyteller. So everybody, let's please all welcome Mark to the show. Hey Mark, thanks so much for joining me again on the show.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I enjoyed our last time. Last time I was sick, so this time it's turned around. I'm sorry you're sick.
Thank you. And everybody, so tonight, I'm so excited. Mark is going to talk about the Atlanta Ripper. Now, the Atlanta Ripper really wasn't that well known. I had a heck of a time, Mark, trying to find any pictures. I did find a couple of articles on the Atlanta Ripper, but
yes.
it's like they're keeping it a secret.
Yes.
What's with that?
Well, of course, when the last time we talked is when, you said, do you have any disturbing stories? And this is just actually a very disturbing story all the way around. And for a lot of the listeners, this is going to delve into a lot of racial issues from the beginning of last century. And so it may be disturbing to a lot of people on that level, because the only way to deal with it is honestly.
Yes.
And, and two, I have to talk about from, my experiences here in the South. I was a child raised in the 60s, during the last changes, 50 years after this story we're going to discuss happened, we were still dealing with racism in a horrible way. Mm-hmm. And with violence and just horrible attitudes. And at the time these were happening in 1911 and 1912 and 1913, it was just unimaginable, the racism. Just unimaginable. And we're talking that this is involving murders 4 times the amount of the Ripper from England, from London. And we never hear about it. And the reason is because it was black women. If this had been poor white women, we would still know this story.
Exactly.
And the way that I found the story, and I agree with you, you can't just go find pictures of the victims. The Ripper, when he was doing his thing in the 1880s, they had all the pictures of all the women and who they were and their backstories. Mm-hmm. And I found a lot of the names and stuff, but there are a lot of them that have been left out. As far as I know, I haven't seen any pictures that I can for sure say is the victims. And they believe that the killer was a black serial killer, which, this whole story needs to be a movie. It needs to be a movie. And there's an underground movement of people who have looked it up, but it really needs to be brought to the surface. Mm-hmm. But the way that I found it, which of course, I'm I found in the at the library, there apparently were there are references to other letters that this person, this Jack the Ripper, sent, but they weren't printed, or it wasn't that big of a story enough to be out there.
Well, in that particular time too, there was segregation.
Oh yeah, well, segregation was law.
Yeah.
Because Abraham Lincoln had freed the slaves, had given the black people the right to vote at some point, I believe, and so then the white communities slapped on segregation, which white people and black people could not be buried in white cemeteries. They couldn't eat at the same counters. They couldn't ride the bus, of course, very famously, Rosa Parks, they had to ride on the back of the bus. In my lifetime, my grandfather was a bus driver in the 50s and 60s. And in Chattanooga at the bus depot in the 60s up until 1969, they still had whites only, coloreds only, water fountains, bathrooms. They, you couldn't, black people had to go sit in the balconies if they went to the theaters. I knew people who were white that were in the 50s and 60s that worked at hamburger joints and stuff like that. And they would pick specific people to wait on the black customers who had to wait out in the parking lot. You'd have to go out there and get their order and bring their food to them. They weren't allowed into the restaurants with the whites.
And the blacks at that time, I don't know, they had like menial jobs. They worked on the sewers. They worked on the laying the railroad ties down. A lot of the women were working in households, rich households,
in household capacities
as servants.
Yes, and a lot of them, worked in the white communities and then had to walk home to, pretty rough sections of town. And up until the 60s, of course there are movies like The Help that have kind of like brought it out, what black women's life was in that period. My mother had a black lady named Willa Mae that worked for our family and some other people that would come and work at our house. And, it was something that was very common. But where I came from, it was a very racist environment. And I actually grew up non-racist. I thought it was very non-Christian. And in my own family, that was a no-no. Because they were fairly racist. And I thought that was just a disgusting item. And then, too, if you didn't go along with racism, you would get abused, too. So, and there's just many, I have a story that I found a while back from this, about 3 years before this story. And it was in Alabama, and it was a black man who was accused of, he grabbed a white woman, who was in a buggy and broke her arm trying to pull her out. And so he was arrested, and a lynch mob came and, got him out of the jail, tied him to a tree, covered him in oil, and the father of the girl that had had her arms broken lit the man on fire.
Oh my God.
And they thought that was honorable. They didn't punish the man for burning the man alive.
Oh.
And it was stated as that this was, an honorable thing they did. So that was, a mentality at that period. And in Atlanta, Atlanta, where a lot of this was happening, in some ways, the blacks had, there were sections that, they had their own stores. They had more respectability there than they did places like in Chattanooga.
Well, at that particular time, Mark, weren't there areas that only the blacks could live in certain areas and the whites lived in the other areas?
Yeah.
And Atlanta at that time...
Yeah, and two immigrants and stuff had their own sections, but yes, the blacks were pretty well... There were, and actually, I think in this paper, one of these things I got, actually, they had white communities having, votes to keep black people out, because there was one community where 4 black families moved in, and so they were, raising the alarm and, keep black people out of your community and la 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 la. And in Atlanta in 1906, there was a race riot, and there was a unsubstantiated, supposed to be 4 white women had been attacked by black men. So several thousand white men and boys went in and attacked and had a riot against the black community, and about 40 black men were murdered.
Wow.
And that was just a couple of years before this. And so, I mean, it was a very hateful time. And like I said, even though this happened in 1911, up until 1969 and 70, I remember how horrible it still was. And it was something totally out of my realm. I mean, it just was not something that I could wrap my head around. And, we had the murders of, Martin Luther King and the Kennedys, and there were a lot, I remember when the riots were going on. A lot of your listeners are probably too young to remember all of that. And they look at the racism now, but racism was a totally different beast 40 years ago. And a lot has changed. But in this case, I'll get back to this story because they were attractive mulatto and black ladies. There wasn't a whole lot done. It was like it was a story, but a whole lot wasn't done about it until it became so enormous, where there were so many people being murdered. But even that, as long as it was black people, it wasn't a shocker. Mm-hmm. Because in one of my other stories here, that happened in 1926, the KKK was here really heavily. It was like the headquarters for one thing of the KKK. And there was like 80, I think I was told 86 people disappeared. Not just black people, but anyone who was against the KKK. So, they just disappeared. Never to be found.
Oh my God.
And so people don't have a concept of that, because now we're taught, everyone thinks, well, if you don't like it, you can say something. Well, back then, if you said something, they could burn your house down. They could kill you. They could just do horrible things to you, your family, and you would be, either killed or worse. There are worse things than just being killed. And, or, you just disappear. And I remember in the 60s, they found one time when they were looking for some of the people that had been killed during, that brought about, the FBI's involvement in to the KKK slaying. They were looking in a pond somewhere in Georgia, and they found like 19 dead black men.
Oh my God.
And you don't hear that story.
No.
You don't hear that story. And a lot of them were unidentifiable. They didn't have the DNA and stuff that, now. So going into that mind frame, people have to think back, if you have no reference except the movies now,
Yeah.
this is truly at a time where if you were black, you had to be sort of invisible. You only could do things that were in servitude of the white community, pretty much. And that way that they were kept from advancing. So, in Atlanta, they did have stores, barbershops, different things that they were working at. And then after the race riots, where the 40 men were killed, it kind of it really, for quite a while, destroyed that kind of, any of that unity, was kind of destroyed. And I'm going to read you the article that led me to this whole thing.
Okay.
And this is from Chattanooga, and anything that I say that offends someone, you just, you're just going to have to bear with it. Because, it's just the way it was. And it is not any way, in any form, anything that I agree with or go with. But this is a story that shows, the way people were. And it was horrible that women were being murdered. But it was also horrible the way that people reacted. So here is the thing that led me to it, because I couldn't believe it the first time I saw it.
Okay.
Looking through the library. And like I said, there are references to other articles, but this is the only one I've found. And the title of this, of course, it's from, let me see, March 11th, 1912. Reforms them by murder. Jack the Ripper says he will do much good to kill Negro women who sin continually.
Oh my God.
Self-appointed executioner of females of own race writes letter to the Times declaring he is not a common criminal. Now he was from Atlanta, but he's sending this to Chattanooga. A reformer whose weapon is death is in Chattanooga. According to messages received by the Times recently, Jack the Ripper, who leaves Atlanta with a record of at least 10 lives taken, is here to work among female members of the colored race. His plan is a simple one. According to his own statement, he simply selects a Negro girl or woman whose life is not an example to others of her race and kind. He then awaits an opportunity, meets her in a dark and secluded corner of some street, cuts her throat, and leaves her dead body for the police to find. There are many who will laugh at such statements. But the record of Jack the Ripper in Atlanta is not one to be treated facetiously. For many months, the police of that city were baffled by a series of murders committed on public streets. In each case, the victim was a Negro woman. The killer used but one method. He slashed the throat of his victims and left them dead on the street. There was never a clue to his identity, and after 6 or 8 such murders had been committed, the police gave up hope. For some time, there have been no Negro women found dead in Atlanta, and police authorities in that city believed that Jack the Ripper had left for Chattanooga. He has not committed a crime here, but has written several letters to the Times warning the Negro women of this city that they had better behave or he will get them. It is not an impossibility. Men of strong intellect, whose ability has been recognized by the world, have given way to a hallucination that they were called to execute sinners and to kill those that are not in use in this world. From uplift the women of my race, colored. Let me see. In the city of Atlanta during the past 2 years, that all the preachers combined have tried. My methods to remedy evils and wrongs doings of our colored women differ from those of the preachers and are very much more effective. Where and when I find a woman is bad or a nuisance in her community, I, of course, await my opportunity, and when it comes to simply cut her throat and place her body in a scavenger barrel, if it is convenient. Before I leave this city, you will find the conduct of colored girls and women is greatly improved. Jack the Ripper.
Was this from Atlanta? This was written in Atlanta, Georgia?
This was sent to Chattanooga, the Chattanooga Times, from the Atlanta Ripper, supposedly.
I didn't know that.
Yes, so I found that story. That's the article that led me to this.
Oh,
now,
my goodness.
We're going to go into, there are great, if you can find the Whitechapel Press copies and things like that, and the Atlanta Constitution has articles of the murders themselves. Let me see. So, but that letter was in 1912. So, the actual murders in Atlanta started, I think the first lady, it's going to take me a minute to get my stuff together. The first woman that they believe was the first murder was in May 29th, 1911. They had a article that said Negro Woman Killed, no clue to slayer, was found with her throat cut near her home, and her name was Belle Walker, and she was found by her sister on Sunday morning after she was supposed to have been home from, she worked as a cook. And then at the first, they didn't call it a ripper until about 2 weeks later when a lady named Addie Watts was killed. And then they began to think, it was that the murders of the negresses were perhaps the work of a solitary killer. And the Atlanta Journal ran a headline on June 16th that said, "Black Butcher at Work." And then they started to give comparisons to London's serial killer of 1888, because...
Now the comparison, the Jack the Ripper in London, there was talk that he could have been a surgeon because of the instruments that he used, and they still don't know who really did that. And anyway, and the way he cut them up, it was all disemboweling and all the personal parts of a woman. Yeah. Now, do you think that was sexual?
Well, in some of the articles I read, they also believe this one had knowledge of anatomy. That he knew what he was doing. And yes, I think it was something, sexual. Here in this one, too, he seemed, in several cases, he took the women's shoes.
In all the cases, he took the women's shoes?
Well, no, in several that I was able to notice, they said the women were found without their shoes.
Oh, that's interesting.
And usually if you see an item that disappears in multiple cases, it's typical of like a trophy or something.
Oh.
It's like a murder case I saw several years ago where the guy kept fingernails. He pulled them off and kept them as trophies.
Oh my God.
And yes, I think in this case, when it started, more people. Let me see. Here's one actually. Several of the cases, they started realizing the women had been choked unconscious. Then their throat was slit from ear to ear. And then they carved the victim always in the same area of the body. And in the paper at that time, they couldn't say
murders had a carving.
He would carve up their, one of the murder victims I know, it said her heart and intestines and everything were laid out beside her, but he carved in their female areas, their private areas, the groin. So
my God.
there was something sexual in the mutilation.
Oh my God! Now I also read that yes, these women were all black women, but most of them were mulatto, half white and half black.
Yes, and they were all attractive.
Yes.
And all of them, except for one that they were talking about, they said all but one seemed to be well-liked, well-respected by black and white people. They were all people working, as maids and servants and cooks. And they were all beautiful women. And they have I've seen a picture of a beautiful mulatto lady they put with these, but I don't think it was one of the victims.
Yeah, I think that was the closest I could.
Because for some reason they should have been putting all that.
You know how hard do you know how difficult?
There was one woman that saw him on July 1st, 1911. A 20-year-old woman named Emma Lou Sharp was at home waiting for her mother, Lena, to come home, and she got worried because of all the murders. And her mother had gone out to the grocery, and when she didn't come back, Emma Lou went looking for her, went to the market. It's not like markets we have now. It was, but she went to the place, the market where her mother would have gone, and they hadn't seen her. And when she was going back home, there was this, she passed this very tall, black, broad-shouldered man wearing a broad-brimmed hat. And he asked how she was feeling, and she said that she was well, and she tried to get past him, and the man blocked her path, and he said, "Don't be afraid. I never hurt girls like you." And then he stabbed her in the back.
Oh, my God.
And he did that. He said, "I never hurt girls like you." So he didn't kill her, but he stabbed her, and she got away. And they found out later her mother had been he had nearly decapitated her.
So his victims, he was slicing their throats.
Yes.
From ear to ear.
In this case, I think in the Ripper in London, he was cutting their throats to keep them from screaming.
Yeah.
And in this case, there were several accounts of that these women were knocked senseless with rocks, bricks, strangled, and then their throats were cut.
Oh my God.
And then he would disembowel them.
Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. The Atlanta Ripper was disemboweling them?
Yes.
Oh my God! But did he do that to every one of his victims?
Not every single one, but there are stories of him disemboweling them. He would take their hearts out. He would take their guts out. He would take their female organs or whatever it was. The papers were too delicate at that time to say exactly what he was doing to them that was in a sexual nature. But they did say, they weren't raped, but he was doing something of a sexual nature towards them. And then there were several of them, like I said, that, they were found without their shoes, or they were found, just something, it was, they couldn't figure out who this person was. And a lot of the white community got together and was raising money and signing petitions to make the police solve this case. And the black community was up in arms about it. But a lot of the white community in Atlanta were like, So.
Oh my.
And then they some of them refused to say that it was an actual, just one person committing these murders. They would say, "Oh, there's no Ripper. This is just individuals doing a copycat thing," or they were just, and they got tanked up on Saturday and cut their wives' throats. It's just something that is something amongst the black community, and they just treated it like it wasn't serious.
But some...
And the way they would put them in the paper. You know, this, like I said, I think if it had been poor white women, you know, they would have been screaming from the rooftops.
Exactly.
And since it wasn't, you know, they were finally forced to put police out, and they started hiring black detectives to try and solve this. And they ended up arresting 2 or 3 guys. I think they arrested 6 in total. And but most of them were released, and most of them that it went fairly far, they kind of proved that they had been tied down and beaten until they...
Yeah, I read that.
You know, that they admitted to... They picked one guy because they said that he had mental issues, and he would have admitted to whatever they told him to.
Well, there was
They cut him down and were, you know, they were just wanting to find someone to say, we got him.
Well, there was one guy that the wife said that her husband would come home on Saturdays at the same time these murders were, and he would be full of blood. No.
Yes, that his clothes were covered in blood. I can find that. Hold on just 1 second. I'll find out. That his... I have to look through my notes.
Oh, that's
here.
okay, honey. That's okay.
Because it was... okay, I think I found it. On August 10th, 1912, more than a year after the first Ripper murders occurred, Henry Brown, also known as Lawton Brown, was arrested for killing Eva Florence, who had been murdered in the previous November. Brown's wife told police that he had come home on successive Saturdays, the same Saturdays that many of the killings had taken place, with his clothes bloody, and would sit before the fire to dry them out. Under questioning, Brown revealed intimate details of other crimes. Detectives believed they had found their man, but had they? That October, Brown went to trial for the Eva Florence murder, but a black man named John Rutherford testified the police had put Brown through the 3rd degree during questioning. Rutherford said the detectives had chained Brown's arms to a chair and then struck him in the head until he confessed.
Oh my God.
And for his part, Brown said he had suffered hallucinations, and it was clear to the jury that he would admit to just about anything if he was pressured. They acquitted him on October 18th, and he became another failure in the Atlanta authorities' quest to convince someone of the Ripper's murders. There was another guy that they, any of the guys that they would have, if they reported how they talked, there was one that said, well, if I was going to kill somebody, I'd have killed my wife because she really gives me trouble, kind of
yeah.
thing. But all of the men that they got, there was only one that I think went to jail, and they never even said who he was supposedly accused of killing. They just picked someone and went, you.
Was he ever released?
What, ma'am?
Was he ever released?
I don't think so.
You mean
they went to jail for life at that time.
Oh.
They usually, I can tell you who it is if I think.
Oh my God, that poor guy.
But they were just picking guys. And,
well, there were 2 people. Weren't there 2 women that saw him?
Well, the one I found here, yes. There was another one that had seen, take me a minute to go through my stuff.
Oh, honey, it's okay.
Let's see. I can tell you here in just a second. Here it is, I think. There was a lady who was leaving her work, and she saw this guy, he whistled at her, and here it is. They started making bets on when he would kill, because they were like, when they really started paying attention to it, 5 women had been killed 5 Saturdays in a row. And it kind of, he was continuing the Saturday until lady named Mary Yeldell left the home of W.M. Selcher on 4th Street, where she worked as a cook. As she was walking past an alley, she heard a whistle. She stopped, and coming toward her was a Negro man, tall, black, and well-built, and moving with a cat-like tread.
Yeah.
Mary ran screaming back to the Selcher house. Mr. Selcher met her at the door, grabbed his revolver, came to the alley, found the man standing there, and when he told him to raise his hand, the man ran away. And the police came but didn't turn up anything. But they figured that, it was the same description the other lady, Emma Lou, had sharpened.
Wow, the same description. And
so she escaped probably getting murdered, and after that, he quit doing Saturday murders.
Yeah, and what did he change? He changed to another day.
He changed to another day because he knew they were looking for him.
I think it was
and
Thursdays.
Then when they arrested 2 of the guys, he quit for a couple of weeks, for about 6 weeks. And then he started back up. And so the guys that were in jail weren't the Ripper. They might have been murderers. If they might have killed somebody, who knows? But they started, I think it was August 31st of that, right after that, they found, that's where they found a 20-year-old victim without her shoes, and her throat had been cut ear to ear. And she was a pretty mulatto girl, and they found another mulatto girl in an alleyway. All of these girls were anywhere from 15 to 20. Very few of them were older. And I think the girl, Emma Lou's mother, Lena, I think probably had been one of the older ones. Mm. But they were all attractive young women, and he just fascinated on them and pursued them down. And I was trying to find, and the police just kept arresting black men. Charlie Owens was sentenced to life in prison for one of the so-called Ripper murders committed during the last 18 months. But it wouldn't say, they never said who he was supposed to have murdered. So they really didn't have anything. They just got him on circumstantial evidence. And at that time, that's all they used, all of them. They just, they found somebody to prosecute and throw him in. And some of these guys, one of the guys that they had asked if he had a razor, and he said no. And they found out he had taken a razor to the barbershop, because at that time, you had to shave with a straight razor.
Yes.
And you didn't have just available disposable razors. So when they did that, they thought that made him guilty.
Okay. Dave wants to know, how many victims do they estimate?
Well, as far as I can tell, they really didn't know. Eventually, the top number I've heard was like 19 to 21. But there were some of the women, when they were counting down while the women were getting murdered. And they would say, there was one woman, they said, well, maybe she's the 7th, maybe she's the 8th, maybe she's the 9th. And in a way, they were being sloppy with even keeping track of who was who. It was just, they were caught up in the drama, but they didn't really, pay it, respect. And when it was over, they figured at least 20, 21 women could have been, because even after it stopped, I think there was one in, let me see, March 1913, Laura Smith was found with her throat cut like the other victims. And then in March 14th is the one I think that they think was about the last one. And that was about the last one. That's when it kind of stopped with the women getting their throats cut.
Well, there was a discovery of some a real gruesome murder.
Yes.
You want to talk about that?
And now repeat your question.
Okay, the Atlanta saw one of the grisliest murders yet in Atlanta, and I don't have the date on that. I guess it was November.
Okay. I thought you were talking about like the one from here with the 7 women, the spiritualists that were killed.
Oh.
Now that was here. I think we talked about that. That one was from here.
Oh.
I don't know a whole lot of other ones from Atlanta. After this, then that story just disappeared. I mean, the Ripper just disappeared.
Well, farther down in the article that I had been reading, it said that Atlanta saw one of the grisliest murders yet. And this time, the victim's head was cut almost completely off.
Oh, yeah. There were some of them in here that were nearly decapitated.
Yes. And
they'd been hit in the head first, and then when he cut their throats, he nearly cut their heads off the neck. But he apparently didn't completely do so. So, I mean, it was a gross and grisly stuff. You know, it just was, but after it was done, you know, I mean, if you look for it, you can find it.
God, I couldn't find any information on this Atlanta Ripper. I had a hard time trying to find it.
And, well, I mean, I found a little bit, but like I said, you know, they don't have pictures of the murdered women.
No.
It's not anything like what they did with the Ripper in London.
No.
And when it was finished, they just brushed it off and forgot about it.
I know. And somebody had mentioned, I guess they didn't hear, that no, this was not publicized. It was like hidden. No, they didn't make a big deal about these murders in 1911.
Oh, okay. Well, 1911. I don't know which one that one is. Now, like I said, the one here from the 7 spiritualists that were killed, it wasn't covered in the town here. The way we found out about it was from Atlanta and Ohio, because they put articles in the paper. And but any of the women that were killed here, they hushed it up.
In Atlanta, Georgia.
No, here in Chattanooga.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're talking about 2 different locations.
Yeah, but that's the only one I know, because I don't know of another one in Atlanta right now.
The Atlanta Rippers?
Huh?
We're talking about the Atlanta Ripper.
Well, we're still, I'm going to, well, when you were talking about another story in Atlanta, I thought you were changing
Oh,
to
no,
story.
that was one of the 21 victims.
Yeah.
They had.
Yeah, no, there were several of the victims that were nearly decapitated.
Yeah. And
now
that,
we're back on track.
Yeah, and that one, the body was disemboweled as well. So whoever this was, if it was the same man, he graduated.
Yeah.
He graduated in what he was doing. Now they didn't say anything about the markings that the other murderer was doing, the sexual carvings. Now, I'm thinking that they may have just said that once in the article and just left that off on the other victims because I guess they didn't want to talk about it.
Well, they avoided that subject a little bit, I think, in the papers at that time. But in several things that I've seen, it seems like several women were carved up in some sexual manner. And the fact that they believe it was a black male, you don't really hear of black serial killers very often. I think the one that was from Atlanta that in the 70s that killed young black men was the only black serial killer I ever heard of. And so because I haven't really looked into, that aspect of it. But if he was truly, since 2 women saw him and identified him as black, I mean, it's a real rare case of a black male serial killer.
Mm-hmm. And they also said that 3 years after the Ripper, after the murders had begun, that firefighters found notes pinned to the fireboxes around the city.
Yes, I I can tell you that terrible comment. Let me see. Let me see. And
that was in March of 1914.
Yes, March 14, 1914, 3 full years after the Ripper murders had begun, firefighters found notes pinned to fireboxes around the city. The author of the notes promised to cut the throats of all Negro women who were found on the streets after a certain hour of the night. The newspaper attributed the notes to Jack the Ripper. Now, there was another murderer in the 20s who kind of played with people like this the same way. The jazz axeman, who is also believed to be black, I believe. And but he would send notes to the papers and say, you know, I like jazz music. If I hear jazz music coming from your house, I won't kill you. So people would have jazz parties to keep the jazz axemen from coming and killing them.
Oh, God, I've heard that before.
Now, yeah, they used that character, actually. My friend Robert Falls was fascinated with that story and told me about it. And it was in the 20s, and they never caught him. And he disappeared after a while. But he would go into people's houses, use their own hatchets that they used to cut up kindling, and kill everyone in the house.
Oh, my God.
And there's actually music of the jazz axe murderer, a song, and I've seen one that the cover of the music had a drawing of people dancing, you know, to Charleston, but they looked nervous.
Oh, my God.
Because they were having jazz parties to keep the axemen from killing them.
Yes,
But he would use the papers in that way. And this guy, someone put, you know, notes on the fireboxes, let them all know, you know, he would kill black women if they were out at a certain time.
All right, we have a question in the chat room.
Sure.
Please ask, how do they know for sure he was black rather than a white guy because of the witnesses posing as a black?
Two of the women identified the male that was trying to, the one that got stabbed in the back, Emily Sharp, she said that he was a black man. And the other lady who went into an alleyway and saw the black man, her and the man that came out with the gun both said he was black. Mm-hmm. So they just attributed that it was a black male. And actually, I think in the one that sent the letter to here, I want to say, I think, they just believed he was black. And
now, so I did read that somebody thought maybe he put this coloring on him to make himself look black. But don't you think another black female would know if this person...
A black female would know the black male.
Yeah.
And there were people at that time, it was very customary for people to do black minstrel shows, black people dressing up as black people. Mm-hmm. But I think, that would be something they would probably notice back then, that we didn't have great makeup supplies,
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
It's not impossible that it happened. It's not impossible that it happened. And it could have, and that could have been something that, could have been done. But as far as what it looks like here, two women said that it was a black male, that the one that got stabbed was close enough to him to get stabbed.
Yeah.
So she said it was a tall, and they both said he was a well-built black male.
Yeah.
And wearing a big black hat. It was kind of a strange sounding kind of thing, and the papers and everybody else associated with it just believed it was a black male killing black women.
And so then what happened? He just like
He disappeared.
he disappeared.
After the last one in 1914, I think. That was the last one that they attributed to him. There were other murders later on, but they didn't feel like it was the same. And the police, of course, were still fighting against. They wanted to say that they didn't want to say that it was a single person doing it.
Oh, they didn't?
And they would say, oh, it's just a bunch of different men getting mad and cutting their wives' throats. And
well, that doesn't make sense.
so they kept poo-pooing the idea that it was a killer who was a serial killer. You know,
that doesn't make
like
sense.
It wasn't.
That doesn't make sense because some of them were young girls working as servants. They weren't married. I don't think they were married.
No, and well, several of them were 15 years old and 17 years old, and the 15-year-old, definitely wasn't old enough, to well, in the South, you never know.
Okay.
Could have been married and had 12 kids by that time because they were selling kids, young girls off.
Oh, you know what?
Very early.
You know what? This is a logical thing. F Warrior saying, do you think the killer intentionally modeled himself after Jack the Ripper because Jack the Ripper had a big hat, a big tall hat?
Yeah, of course. And they were getting off on the fact of being, for a killer to be associated with another famous killer, that had to be very ego-satisfying. So, of course, he based himself, It took several women being murdered before they started going, is this the Black Butcher? At first they were wanting to call him the Black Butcher.
Uh-huh.
But then they started going, well, no, he's like the Ripper. And then I think when they did that, then he started really, if it was an individual, he started trying to be more like that, just for drama.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it was, he had a terrible hang-up on pretty girls and mutilating them in a sexual manner. So, I mean, he had some real hang-ups,
Oh, my God.
But the fact that there were quite a few murderers at that period, like the London Ripper, this one disappeared. The Jazz Axeman disappeared. The person who killed the people in Villanelle disappeared. And there were big, murders and stuff like that, but they just disappeared or went somewhere else and just continued in another mode or something. Yeah. I don't know what they did, but, they just lost their trail.
But that's so
strange. And they never were
strange.
prosecuted.
Yeah, that's really strange because, like in the case of the Zodiac, he stopped, but something had to have happened for him to stop killing.
Yeah.
Either he was in jail for something, or he got really ill, or he died of a heart attack or something, because he went on and on and on in his killings, and he stopped, and they still haven't found out who the Zodiac is.
Yeah, and I agree. He could have been put in jail. He could have been under the radar. In jail. There's plenty of people, in jail that have never been, that are responsible for other murders they'll never solve.
Yeah.
Or he could have, if he's a criminal, he might have tried to pull something on somebody and somebody killed him. So, or died of old age, or, they typically, I wouldn't think, just give up on this was like a drug. This was attention. And, to just give it up. I don't know, there may be a psychosis or something that they do that. I don't know. Or maybe they just all of a sudden they get it out of their system and they quit.
Now, Mark, the area that all this took place, I don't know what it looks like today. Have you ever been over there in that area?
I don't really go to Atlanta very much. I've been down, the last time I really was downtown Atlanta was probably in the 70s. at this time, I think, it was still rebuilding. It was still fairly primitive to what we have now.
Okay.
So, but I haven't been there to see these places. Of course, this is just a story that I just kind of kept stumbling over.
Well,
and finally, looked at it.
I know. When you told me about it, I said, oh my God, we got to do a show on this, because I had never heard of it. Never. Yeah. And like I said, the information on it, there are a few articles on it, and that's about it. And it seems to be the same information over and over. They repeat, how they copy from one website to the other.
Yes, and a lot of the women, they say, well, there's 20 murders. Well, you have a hard time finding a list of the murdered victims. And if I could, I would go to Atlanta and look and see if I could dig up more on it. I'm sure if you went personally to the library and looked up the Atlanta Constitution, the newspaper of that time, I'm sure you could dig up a lot more.
Yeah.
And you may be able to find that stuff online. I'm not sure.
Well, I couldn't find anything, honey. I couldn't.
I know. I've tried. And like I said, I was very surprised that they didn't show pictures of the women, who they were. But like I said, it was the time, they weren't so interested in it and panicked over it since it wasn't in the white community.
Well, the thing is, too, if these are poor black females, the families may not have ever taken a picture of them as well.
That's true. That's very true. And they, but if, like I said, if it had been poor white women, we would know this story, we'd know it, and we'd be going to what we had around Jack the Ripper.
Huh. Yeah.
He was sending notes to different cities saying he was going to come and visit.
Oh, he did?
I mean, from what I understand, that like this letter he sent here to Chattanooga, they just couldn't. They thought he was coming to Chattanooga. They thought he was moving from Atlanta to Chattanooga, but nobody ever started getting their throats cut, so they figured he didn't come here. So I think if they looked around at some of the other cities surrounding Atlanta, they probably have some of the same things going on. Mm-hmm. And then it's either him or it's copycats. And so, because, it's like the Black Dahlia murder, tons of people showed up saying, I killed her, because they wanted that attention. And so you get a lot of copycats, and you get a lot of people who are mentally challenged or sick, and, they want to be a part of it.
Oh, and we have another question. Yes, Mike, all the victims were mulatto.
Yeah.
They were half black and half white. Now, I did read...
He was choosing, and I'm not quite sure why he picked that, and that aspect. But they were all attractive. They were all young, and maybe he had a hate towards white people, and since they're mulatto, half white.
Well, they were supposed to be good-looking females.
They were beautiful. Oh, very beautiful.
So, okay, now, Mark. Now, these females, not only the ones that were murdered, all had jobs, and they would walk in those districts at night because that's where they lived. Now, it's a possibility that he picked and chose his victims. And it's possible that he was hiding somewhere, because it doesn't say where they were killed. Were they killed on the street? It just said one of the victims were dissected in bushes, but it didn't say about the other.
One was found on a railroad tracks. He would kill them. The girl that was stabbed in an alley. Some of the women were found in alleys. Some of the people were in bushes. Most of the places did not say that they were found in houses. I don't think most of them were killed like he knew their working schedule. He knew where they
know. They were working in...
They were working, very hard-working,
yes.
well-respected women.
Yes.
So, but I think the aspect of maybe the mulatto, where, maybe he felt, since they were half white, he was targeting them like that. But I know in New Orleans, I've seen quite a few pictures of mulatto women from Louisiana and New Orleans, and they were absolutely beautiful. They had beautiful features and were kind of regal looking.
Uh-huh.
And so, but I don't know. But it was a reverse. Maybe it was a reverse prejudice. He felt like since they were half and half, he was just targeting them as a way. If he had killed white people, then the house of cards would have come down on him real hard. But since they were half, people let him get by with it.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's just a sick. To me, it's just a sick story. The people, some of the newspapers, the way they report it, the way it's looked at, the attitudes of the white courts, it was just sick.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of white communities, people in the white communities that did try to help. And they raised money, they signed petitions, they pressured the police. And it was the police who were really like, until they were forced into it, they really weren't pursuing it. And then when they pursued it, they just very lazily grabbed any black guy that they thought would fit the bill.
Well, they just wanted to solve the murders.
They just wanted to make people shut up and go away.
Yeah, exactly.
And it didn't matter if they put someone in jail for the rest of their life, big deal. And like I said, at one point when they caught two of the guys, the killing stopped for 6 weeks, but then they started back up. And so then that, to me, that clears, probably clears any of the ones that they were tackling.
And you know what? So he stopped, but then he also changed his days from Saturday to Thursday. So they're okay. So
that kind of thing. And the guy that the wife, I think the one story that was so strange was the wife saying her husband would come home with bloody clothes and he would sit by the fire and dry them out.
Yes, I know.
And that's the one that they said was mentally challenged, and the jury felt that he would have admitted to anything they asked him.
Yeah.
But I thought, but if she really said that, why did she really say that? But again, there are some people do some weird things in these kind of situations, because like the jazz axeman, one of his victims lived, and he had killed her baby and somebody else, but she had lived. He had cracked her head with the axe.
Oh my God.
And so, but she had a vengeance toward this other person, so she blamed it on them just to get them in trouble. And so you can't tell sometimes what some of these people are doing and what their motives are, Yeah. So, but if he truly had come home with blood-soaked clothes that he was drying by the fire, that's rather unique.
Yeah.
I would like to have known the truth on that matter, but there's no way to find out any of it now.
No.
It's just lost to time.
Oh, yeah. Is there anything else you want to tell us about the Atlanta Ripper, Mark?
Well, that's actually about all I know, because, like I said, I just stumbled across my little story from Chattanooga, because I'd seen that several times, and and then I really didn't look at it as heavily, because I was looking for other stories. But when I looked at that, I thought that's worthy of a movie.
Oh, yeah.
Worthy of a real book.
Oh.
That's worthy of a study of a black serial killer, in 1900s.
There hasn't even been a YouTube done on the Atlanta
Not that I
Ripper.
know of. I mean, like you said, there's very few things on the line about it.
No.
And, there's not a whole lot, we can pull out at the moment about it. I wish it would be good to be able to go back and see if there were what the police records said, and maybe those may still exist, somewhere. Maybe they can look them up. But hopefully somebody will get interested, go look this up and turn it into a bigger project, because I think it's something that needs looked at, needs studied, or brought to light,
And so in your book, you do have a book.
Yes.
It's Chattanooga Chills.
Chattanooga Chills, and my second one is Chattanooga Chills Scream Louder.
Okay.
So that one's coming out probably early next year.
Are you gonna put like Jack the Ripper or anything like that in that
that's
book?
in my upcoming one.
So when you do add Jack the Ripper to that book, are you going to get more technical on that story?
Well, I'm going to look at it. What I will probably do from my aspect is, since I'm metaphysical and I do seances and ghost hunts and all that stuff, I will probably use my spirit board, do a seance about it, and see if we can't, bring up information about it.
Oh.
And then if I was closer to Atlanta, I would go to Atlanta and just dig.
Oh,
but
yeah.
like I said, it's in the midst of quite a few stories that I have. It's like Corpsewood. It's one of my stories. It's not the pinnacle of my stories. It's not the only one that I look at.
I love that. I love that story. I mean, it's sad, but
it's very sad, but it's also, it's just so warped. And right now, when I came on your show, I know two people who are writing books about Corpsewood now.
Oh, they
and
are?
one of them's about to come out. Amy Petula, I think, is doing one. Tommy Golden is going to do one. And they all called me to ask me stuff of my personal experience, with people who knew it or knew around it, or, so after your last show, I got flogged by people looking for information about Corpsewood.
Wow, no kidding. Yes, because
and I want to apologize to people, because when you called me and we were talking about Corpsewood, I was so tired and sick. I've been traveling that I almost couldn't remember my own name, and I couldn't even remember the name of the killers at the time, because I was just.
You mean when you did the show with me, you were awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. Well,
Oh, my God.
And I thought, oh, my goodness, but off of that, I got so much response.
Wow.
And like I said, I think there's 2 books. I know a movie that someone wants to make about it. So that one is taking off. So I would like people to look at this story and take it apart a little bit more, and see what it is. Because I think it's sad, and but it has all the elements of a really intriguing book or movie, I think.
Mark, nope, as far as I could tell when I interviewed you, when I had you on the show, the only thing that was on Corpsewood was people that had gone out there to do paranormal investigating. There were no shows on it.
People have told me they've done shows, but I haven't seen any, and it's such it's mostly groups who've gone out there, Smiling at Corpsewood, and a lot of people who go out there taking it very lightly.
Oh my God, how can they do that?
Then there's the people who are serious,
it was horrific.
Investigators who really have, and I've been told a few things since then that, it's been interesting.
It was horrible. It was a horrible murder.
It was a horrible murder, and it just keeps drawing people's attention. And like I said, there's 2 books. There's a possible movie. There's another one that I know of. Someone is wanting to make
I know you're writing this other book. So if you have any awesome stories that you know I would love to send to my viewers, oh my God, you've got to let me know.
Well, the one that has shocked, there was one that shocked me, but it was not as much a ghost story as just there was a lot of things here in Chattanooga where they were finding all these cemeteries, and people would just move the markers and go ahead and build, most of it, or they'd bag up the bones and give them to somebody, and then hopefully somebody disposes of them correctly. But there was a cemetery that is associated with a ghost story. I'd always heard the ghost stories about the property, but I didn't know why. And then I found this story from like 1890 of where this large property in Chattanooga that this really kind man had, a farmer, had a lot of land, and he, to be kind, allowed the poor people in the area to use a portion of that land as a free cemetery. So, and before then, it had been an Indian burial ground. So he allowed, there was about 400 or 500 poor white and black people who buried their families there. And when he died, the next guy that got the property decided that he didn't, he was very disrespectful of it being a black cemetery. And he just was like, well, I'm going to turn it over, we're going to plow it under and make a strawberry field. And all of these people went nuts, and were going to shoot him in the forehead if he dared, because there were people that had there was one that had like 6 children buried there, their mom, their dad. They said, well, we were told it was going to be a permanent cemetery. And so he was going to plow it all under and raise strawberries. And the last part of the story I found, I've got to go find the rest of it. But I thought it was very interesting because he was saying he was very determined that as soon as the weather had gotten better, he was going to plow it under, and they were very determined they were going to kill him. And so I'm going to look that story up.
Oh, wow.
Well, I thought, who would want to buy a strawberry off of, out of a graveyard to begin with? And just the disrespect he had of it. And the property that was built on it was an old steel factory later, and it's gone defunct, and now they're going to tear it down and make a park.
Wow.
But when I knew a guy that was a guard there when it was a steel factory, and the guards were scared to be there at night because you could see Indian spirits running around smudging the area trying to cleanse it.
Wow.
And it would terrify them.
Oh
but
God.
then, but none of them knew that, it used to be a cemetery.
Wow.
And now it's, and now it's going to be turned into a park.
Oh my
but
God.
It's still a cemetery. But at one time, I guess the guy finally plowed it under because there are no graves there that you can see.
Oh my God. Well, I'll get with you next year, and hope you come back in next year, 2016. I'll be scheduling all new shows, and I'll get with you to find out if you have some other awesome stories for us.
Well, thank you so much for having me and inviting me, and I hope you get to feeling better quick.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Thanks, honey. And
thank you everyone out there for listening. And like I said, anyone out there that wants to write a book, look at this story. I think if they went and dug just a little bit, I think you could find all sorts of stuff that we just don't know about. And I think it could lead to something very interesting that needs to be brought to the surface.
Where can they buy your books?
My first book is on Amazon, and it's Chattanooga Chills, Mark Foltz, and the second one will be also. And then after the first year, I'm going to put them on Kindle.
Awesome.
So, but locally, you can get the book through Barnes & Noble and Winder Binder Books, but I think Barnes & Noble can order it from other cities, if they need to. But Amazon or eBay, or it's in quite a bit of those outlets.
Awesome. Mark, thank you again so much for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, and I hope I was able to fill in some blanks.
Oh, it was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you, Mark, so much for joining me on the show and telling that story. It's one that it is not well known, and it's been hidden for many years from Atlanta, Georgia. They just don't talk about it. And the information is really difficult to get. I couldn't get any pictures. It was really, really difficult. And it just seems like the same article is repeated and repeated. So somebody would have to go into the archives at Atlanta, Georgia, and get the information on these murders. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm so happy that you came to the show. And God, guess what? Guess what is next Friday? The last show of the month. It's on archaeology, evil archaeology. And my guest is Dr. Heather Lynn, and she is actually an archaeologist. And she's going to talk about the jinn and demons and how these artifacts become possessed. It's going to be a really good show. I can't wait to have her on. And now Royce, yes, Royce did tell me about his incident with I think it was the BK killer. Royce, do you want to talk about it? I have some time. Do you want to call me and talk about it and tell the viewers about your story? I know it's on a delay. If Royce wants to call and talk about his story, because I didn't know he was going to tell everybody, and I saw him put that in there. Oh, you want me to do shout outs? Okay. Royce, do you want to tell your story? You have a half hour if you want to tell your story. BTK, yes. I know the story. He told me. Oh my God, don't forget, Thursday, November 5th, Karen A. Dolman, the Ouija board expert, the Ouijaologist, she's coming back on the show, and guess what? We are doing a live seance. Now, she told me, you guys, you can send me questions. I'm going to post, and I'll tell you what you need to do. The Ouija board is not a psychic or a medium, and there are certain questions you can ask the board. And, Royce is calling. Oh, hey, honey. Royce, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, why don't we wait till you feel better, hon? I'm worried about you being sick and stuff and having to talk and everything. I'll see if I can get some pictures and stuff together.
Okay, all right. So everybody, I have Royce on the phone. Tell the viewers that you're going to tell them.
Oh, we'll see if we can get some pictures and stuff together, and I'll see if I can get some more stuff together to, make it a little more interesting for us. Let me mute you. I've got you on speaker. Sorry.
That's okay.
And we'll just see if we can get everything together and make a little more longer show out of it and stuff, and go into a little more detail.
Oh, God. Okay, honey. Well, you'll be in touch with me through email or phone call.
Yeah, and I'm kind of working with you again, second stuff, having to talk and everything, and I'll just see if I can get some copies of the police reports and some pictures and just put together a regular packet for it and get it to you and stuff, and we'll see about putting together a regular show.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and talk about it and put some more details together.
Awesome. Oh, my God. Thank you so much, Royce. This is going to be awesome. As long as you don't mind talking about it. Thank you, honey.
Okay. I'll let you go and hope you get to feel better.
All right. Thank you. Thanks. Bye. Awesome. Yay. It's a very interesting story that he has. Anyway, so November 5th, I will send out a message to everybody. You can ask a question, but there are only certain questions you can ask, because Karen said that the Ouija board, the spirits that she contacts, they are not they're not psychics or mediums, and so I'll get that out, and that's November 5th, and I think, let's see. Oh, God. Okay, and November 12th, Heidi Hollis, we're going to do Shadow People. Shadow People and the Hat Man. I did that show a long time ago on another channel, and she's coming back, and we're going to do it on my channel, okay? All right, so you want me to do shout-outs? Okay. F Warrior, I haven't seen you in a long time. Thanks, honey. Renee Rates, The Unseen Scene. Dave, my buddy, Country Roads, Paranormal. Don't forget to go to his channel. He's got some friggin' awesome things coming up. Janet W, Lily Villa Lobus, Butter Kisses, Jen LL, Unique Sweet Annie, Jesse Machuca, Elaine Michael. Okay. Hey everybody, would you please give my show a like as well? I'd really appreciate it. So things seem to happen after the show. Elaine Michael, Spooky Raven, my friend, Rick Garrett, Crystal Trippett, Mike Hazard. Okay, honey, I butchered your name and I'm really sorry. Janet McWilliams, anybody else? Lisa Jones. I know I saw Lynn Bowling earlier, and I saw Ginger Simmons earlier. And Royce, my friend Royce Hinman. Thank you, Butterfly Kisses. Thank you. Oh, Griffin Corcoran. Did I say it right? Corcoran. Miss M. Paraprincess Patricia. Anybody else want to shout out? Oh, thank you. Okay, I am going to go to bed and watch TV and put, I have a, what do you call one of those vaporizers? Cherry K. Montalbano. Yes. Hazard. I'm sorry, Mike. You're going to have to, give me the symbols. Putty tat. Yes. Putty tat. Meow, meow. Anybody else want to shout out? Yes, I will. I actually, my daughter gave this to me. She went to the doctors. The doctor said that if she hadn't come in, that she would have gotten pneumonia, and she was highly contagious. And guess what? Maria Amador. Hi, Maria. Thanks for coming. F Warrior, it was so nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. Thanks for coming to the show, everybody. It's always a pleasure to see everyone. Margarita Horvath. Oh, and Spooky Raven, you'll start up your shows again, honey, next month. That's a girl. Spooky Raven has a show. It's an excellent show. I always support her, and I also post for her shows. She's got an excellent radio show. Tell them what the radio show is, honey. Okay, Lisa Knox wanted a shout out, and somebody else wanted one too. I remember Lisa. She lives in the UK and she can't always come. Oh, Kathy Salento. Hi. You're welcome, Maria. I got Annie. Unique Annie, Sweet Annie. Okay, guys. I'm gonna go now. Oh, Alicia Franco. There you go. Anybody else want to shout out? Again, I want to thank you so much for coming to the show. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm really excited about the upcoming shows that are coming up. Some awesome topics. I can't wait. Okay? So everybody have a wonderful weekend. Next weekend is Halloween. I can't wait. Gonna get some Chinese food or pizza and we're gonna sit around and watch scary movies and have some fun. Love that time of the year. Okay, everybody, I'm gonna say good night, and again, thank you so much. There you go. Anything but ordinary, right? And you'll see me posting for her. Please don't forget to give my show a like, and for those who have not subscribed yet to my channel, if you would do that, I would appreciate it. And I will see you all next week. I hope I didn't miss anybody for the shout outs. And thanks, Annie. Thanks, sweetie. And I hope to see you all back next Thursday for another awesome show on what? On Do You Believe? On Paranormal Zone TV. Good night, everyone. I love you. Thank you. Good night.